Bird Emergency. I'm Grant Williams. I am a bird nerd. And if you're a follower of the Bird Emergency, you will know that we've done a couple of episodes where we've talked about using soundscapes, recordings of the natural environment, to aid in research in seabirds and with glossy black cockatoos. And the Albert lyrebird as well. So it's a technique that's being used a lot in conservation. And today we're going to talk to Dr. David Watson, who is at CSU. There he is, about an idea. I think that's how we'll formulate it. An idea about how we can get a better bang for the buck when it comes to conservation and re-establishment of denuded habitat. I think that's probably a good way to frame it. Hi, David. How are you? Thanks for coming into the Bird Emergency.
Good morning. Great to be here.
If you're a follower of mine on Twitter, you may have seen Dr. Dave, the Dr. Dave account on Twitter, and David's been doing an irregular series, shall we say, an opportunistic series based on whatever birds have popped in to his hood, and he's been identifying the calls and telling us a bit about them. So, Dave, are you a certified bird nerd?
Oh, card carrying, yes, bird nerd from way back, and I'm that much of a bird nerd. I even teach fellow bird nerds how to be more nerdy.
Now, just before we dive into your latest paper, which is why I hit you up and said get on the show, are you one of the folk teaching ornithology at
That's
CSU?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So I'm a professor of ecology at Charles Sturt, and I've been teaching the bird course there since I started about 21 years ago. So it's the graduate certificate, graduate diploma of ornithology taught by distance. It's the only degree-based course in ornithology in the known universe. So it's if you want to take your bird nerdery to the next level, come and say hello.
Okay, well, I've got you here. This is going to save me a phone call to the university. For someone like me, Dave, that's got an applied science qualification that I took before a degree in my field was available, and with like a humanities qualification as well. Can someone like me? I mean, my qualifications in horticulture. Can I enrol in that course, or does my not having a biology or physics or chemistry qualification or block me from becoming an ornithologist?
Good question, and you're free to apply. So the way it works, it is a postgraduate degree. So we do ask that. So it is, for the most part, it is for students that have a previous degree, not necessarily in the sciences, not necessarily in the biological sciences. If you're not sure, if we're not sure, what some students elect to do is they take one subject. It's like, look, let's just try this out. And that's really as much for you as it is for us. Yep. And that gets you into the swing of things. For many potential students, it's been a while since they've studied. So it's sometimes just getting back on the horse, as it were. And if you're happy and it's working, then we can just tick a few boxes and you're in. So yes, we take people from a wide variety of backgrounds. We do recognise that there are many ways to acquire knowledge. Completing degrees is just one of those. So if you're not sure, go through to the enrolments people, the good people. If there's any questions, it'll come back to us. But yeah, recommend it.
Fantastic. Well, there we go, bird nerds.
Now it's done.
Perhaps a pathway for some further study to satisfy your itch, if that is what you're interested in doing. I have no idea how I would use a qualification in ornithology at my
Oh, look,
stage in life, David.
for many, it's not about the qualification. It's about the formal structure.
The learning,
So we've
yeah.
got plenty of people. Yeah, we've got plenty of people, professionals who are into birds from a variety of ways. They're wildlife carers. They work in a wildlife agency. They're doing a particular thing as a consultant, but they recognise, look, they know stuff, but they want a grounding. They want a formal sit down, pay attention. This is the basics. This is the framework. To slot in what they already know, and then to give them kind of a structure to then start adding new knowledge to that. But if it's not your jam, fine. But just if it's something you've been considering, it's well worth exploring.
Yeah, I was just pleased to see something like that turn
Mm.
up. Really, I think it's really good that it has that flexible approach to letting people develop their skills. Funnily enough, David, before we get into the bioacoustic side of the chat, I spoke to Ricky Coughlin a few days ago, and she's just launching a course in bird watching, which is obviously not an accredited or certificated kind of course, but it's aimed at helping people lift
Yep.
their game when it comes to morphology and then placing maybe target species and whatnot into their ecological environmental niches to help you be more effective when you get out there with your scope or your binoculars and whatnot. So yeah, it's kind of good. I kind of wish
No,
these
please
things
see
were
that.
around when I
And
was a
Ricky
kid.
was Ricky was a former student in the birdie course that we teach. So I remember Ricky from way back. So I wish her all the best with that, and I think that'll be a great way for people to, yeah, just for looking to take their interests just a bit further. So well worth pursuing.
Of course, people will be able to listen to the chat that I had with Ricky. Ricky was the warden at the Broome Bird Observatory, among other things. So she's got
Mm.
a lot of practical knowledge and can handle tourists. So
Oh, she's one of those embarrassingly talented people. She's an amazing artist. She's really great at taking quite complicated ideas and conveying them visually in a really accessible way. So you don't even know you're learning. It's a gift.
so there you go, Ricky. I don't know if we pumped up your tyres enough, but there you go.
Uh,
So, David, tell me about the reason that I chased you up. Um, this paper that you put out. First, what was the idea in pursuing or deciding to publish the paper?
mm. So the idea was born from a researcher working with me, Liz Znardzic. She's a postdoctoral researcher working on wetland birds, rails, bittens, sneaky things. And she's pioneered the use of camera traps to detect them. You often think of camera traps, those motion triggered cameras, as things that mammal people use to see bandicoots or Tassie devils or whatever. And they're originally designed for hunting, for deer hunters in the US to find out where deer go on their property or in the spots that they like to visit. And Liz pioneered the use of that tech and then acoustics to find these really sneaky birds. And she's been working with me for a few years. And she had the idea originally. It's like, hey, seabird people have been using acoustic lures for a while. So there's an island, it's offshore, it might have rats or cats or whatever on it. You deal with that threat, you get rid of the threat, but then you need to tell the birds, they're puffins or shearwaters or petrels, whatever they are, it's safe, it's okay.
Come to my party! Come
You
to
know,
my party!
come back, come back, come back. And so you broadcast the call of that one species. And that's been done for years. It works well. Aquatic people do this, whales, with whale calls, dolphins and stuff, both to come here or stay away. There's a fishing net. There's you could get snarled on something. But her idea was, hey, what about doing this at the community scale? What about doing this with everything? Because the data we're collecting with the collaborative work we're doing on wetland birds, but also the broader work I'm doing with the Australian Acoustic Observatory, where we've got about 200 machines around Australia right now recording everything 24/7. So we've got oodles of data on what places sound like. And that's a storehouse of information that we could use. A fire rips through, a storm rips through, something bad happens. Can we use that whole of system recording, what we call a soundscape, to tell frogs, bats, birds, cicadas,
Yeah, come back.
and also things that don't necessarily vocalize but do hear other sounds. So it's like, that sounds like a pretty productive wetland. I'm going to go and check that out. Can we use that to fast track recolonisation? So that's where it started. And then the more we thought about it, it's like, hey, this is actually pretty doable. It's pretty cheap. You can go to JCar and get what you need to do this.
Yeah.
And there's lots of value adding that would come from this the more you think about it. So it's really just saying, hey, acoustics is being talked about a lot as a monitoring method, as a way to find out who's here, who's around, and more powerfully, who's not here. Let's turn that around. Let's turn that around, use this storehouse of recordings we've got, make mixtapes, play them, and see if we can fast track recolonisation.
I love that. The Habitat mixtape.
That's it. Best of.
The Reclaim Marsh mixtape. I can just see that that being a chart topper, Dave. I'm pretty on top of what's going on. I'm always reading and following up things on Twitter and whatnot. Why did I not know about the what did you call it? The Bioacoustic Observatory or whatever. What?
Don't
like
beat yourself up, mate. There's a lot. No. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. You can't be on top of everything. It's a project. It's a project. It's not my baby. I'm one of a bunch of researchers that have been working on this for the past 5 years or so. Yeah, just Google Acoustic Observatory and you'll get right there and you'll find out more about it. It's all open access. All the data is online, so you can listen to a top-end wetland. You can listen to a North Queensland savanna, woodland. You can listen to Truana, a really isolated island in the Furneaux Group in Bass Strait, and you can hear what it sounds like.
So is that a formal collaboration between universities, or is it a loose collaboration between individual researchers?
It's a formal collaboration between James Cook Uni, University of Queensland, University of Queensland University of Technology, University of New England, and us, CSU, researchers at all those institutions. So we begged, borrowed, and demanded some money from our institutions. We then went to the feds and said, "Oi, how about you match that?" And we bought a bunch of tech and got it all over Australia right now, recording and storing that data. There's a lot of the things we want to be able to do with acoustics. It's just over the horizon in terms of the tech to detect individual species, to do really fancy, broad scale analyses. Some of that we're doing now, but a lot of it we want to be able to do. We need to get the skills, we need to train people, and we need to start recording now. So we've got this benchmark data sitting there, archived, ready to go.
Now, when I spoke to Eleni about her Seabird Soundscapes project, a large part of the analysis that she was doing for ID and then separating what the calls were once she'd got down to a species level, what the actual calls meant, was being done by AI. Is your project focusing mostly on AI, or are you bringing the tapes home on the weekend and going, "Sorry, dear, can't have dinner. I'm listening to Kakadu"?
So the size of this endeavour is rather large. So these machines are pulling in about 1 gig of data a day, and 15 years worth of this data set will be the size of the entire internet 15 years ago. So 15 is the magic number there. So no, way more than any human, an army of humans can listen to. So the trick is to train computers to do stuff. But in order to do that, you need massive call libraries, annotated call libraries. That's what this is, and that's what this isn't, to train a computer so it can start to recognize these quite complicated signatures. That's one of the many things we're doing with this data. But really, our role in this is more as curators to say, look, let's get it together, let's get the data together, and let's make it available to anybody to do whatever it is that they want. This could be artists, this could be school teachers, this could be environmental monitoring, many things.
And I'm guessing there's an opportunity for volunteers to assist with identifying things that maybe the computers haven't tagged yet, because
Indeed, and that's the challenge with many acoustic projects, is to get that tagged data, and that there's no two ways about it. That requires lots of person hours, and depending on what it is, sometimes that's a person with a lot of experience. But our Hoot Detective little trial, that's ours. That's just listen to nighttime calls, hear an owl, and put a box around it. That's an owl. Not even sure what owl it is. That's fine.
Yep.
That's still telling a computer right there.
And that's right. And then you can send that file out to the 20 owl researchers that you know and say, which one is this and what is it doing? And to build the database up. Yeah, it's really exciting, and it's really the only way to make use effectively within the budgets that you're all working on or working with to achieve big outcomes, isn't it? Because
look, that's the unfortunate thing, and I think there's a lot of really worthy outreach and engagement that goes on under the citizen science banner, but there's also a lot of higher ups, certainly in government right now, see citizen science as just a cheap
as a way to not spend money. That's right.
As a way to not spend money, exactly.
Why should we give Dave any more money next year? Because we've got 50,000 people in their lounge rooms doing stuff. Yeah,
and I think that the best citizen science approaches marry those two valuable partners of scientists doing cool stuff and a whole lot of people interested in doing cool stuff and with a variety of skill sets, but contributing, and together great things can happen.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure if we were able to interrogate the data about who the citizen scientists are, I reckon that 50% of them would be people who are scientists, who are further volunteering their time.
There's been a fair bit written about that too. So especially in the plant world, people finding rare plants, people describing new plants, they're mostly on the other side of 60 and not necessarily employed anymore. And it's a problem. So these are engaged people. They're happy to give their time. I'm not beating up, orchid enthusiasts at all. But that is not a sustainable situation. In 30 years, who's going to be doing that work? Because we're not training those people right now.
That's right.
That's a real issue.
And the other, extending that even further, Dave, is that you and Maggie, who Turn Girl for people on Twitter, who has contributed to the show before, I'm sure that when you're not doing your allotted hours of work, that you and people like you, using your skills as scientists, are contributing to citizen science projects in your own way. So the point I was really making is that if there's 50,000 citizen scientists working on a project, I reckon that 10,000 to 20,000 of them are people with qualifications and skills who may be employed as scientists somewhere else. So it's not like there's an army of me and my neighbours doing all the work. It's still leaning on free work from people who are not being given $40,000 for a project. They're being given $15,000 for a project. So,
indeed, but science, especially all the scientists I know, we are in two-edged sword.
Now,
it's can you hear me?
I can now. We have to just acknowledge the fantastic contribution to the Australian communal life that Malcolm Turnbull made with the NBN, and might get you to try and restate that, David, because I lost it. I'm pretty sure everyone else did. So you started with the scientists that you know, and I'm sure there's a lot of them.
Yeah. So the point I was making is that we do it for love. We do it for love, and we spend a lot of our time doing this kind of stuff outside of hours, just because we love contributing. We love learning.
Yeah, and but it's not a sustainable way to develop a scientific community, is it? So,
Not. It's not, and it's got problems because it favours those people who can afford to work for free, and that's
yep,
a lot of people are excluded, and that's a huge problem.
yeah, and it kind of defeats um, the popular view about what citizen science is. Like it's
Bingo,
promoted,
bingo.
promoted in a way of sharing knowledge and promoting access, but yeah, I'm not going to criticise it, but I am certainly saying, as you are there, that there is some limitations, and it's not a sustainable approach, in preference to properly funding universities and the departments that do the work.
Yeah.
Let's have one little bit of political stuff before we dive more into the paper.
All right. Go for it.
Biodiversity is absent from an election campaign at the moment, David. I'm not even hearing the Greens banging on about it. Why is it? Do you think it's because the community hasn't been trained to latch on to biodiversity as a term in the same way that everyone has latched on to climate change and greenhouse gas?
Yeah, it's an issue. I think there was a survey done years ago in New South Wales, and most people interviewed thought biodiversity was a branded detergent.
Sure.
So just the word is a hurdle right there. Now that's dated and that's a limited data set, so don't read too much into that. But I think I try and avoid the use of the word biodiversity. I talk about wildlife because that's, my neighbour knows what that is. But call it what you want. But
it's
nature,
fraught,
wildlife.
though. But isn't that fraught, David? Because, for instance,
It is fraught.
I share a house with someone who doesn't have the same passion for me as about birds and plants and whatnot. But noisy miners to him are wildlife, right? If I use the term wildlife. But noisy miners is not about biodiversity in my patch. They're driving out some of the other species. So even though we had the sort of the Green election in, what was it, 83, the stop the dams elections and whatnot. I mean,
yep.
as a young student, I was out at all the protests and whatnot, but I don't see activists in the streets anymore. Of course, not during COVID, but even I reckon in the last 6, 7, 8 years. I think we've had sort of refugee protests in Melbourne, but I haven't seen anyone sort of going swift
Extinction
parrots,
Crisis,
or honey eaters.
Extinction Crisis is a group that's really latched onto this, but they make a lot of enemies. They necessarily disrupt, and that turns a lot of people off. I think it's tricky territory, and I think many people are struggling. They're struggling with health. They're struggling with financial stress. They're struggling with a lot of pressing issues that are affecting them daily. And I'm certainly sensitive about that when I'm trying to engage the broader community with some esoteric bird or some rare orchid or whatever it is. I don't want to add to their stresses, but I also want to let them know that there are some genuinely quite straightforward things that they can do to help out that little bird, that little orchid, and who they vote for is close to top of that list.
Yeah, and was it yesterday that the report came out? I just saw it in my feed yesterday about the um, the contribution that bird tourism, bird watching tourism,
Mm.
made to the economy. Um, Now that's great, that's valid and everything, but why are we not making tourism bodies bang on about conservation? We we
We're getting there. So
yeah
we're getting there, and I think avi tourism, as it's called, it's got a word now. So bird related tourism is most definitely growing, and I think ecotourism, call it what you want. There's problems with some of these terms, but nature focused tourism is going off the charts.
yeah
And I think travel. Who knows what international travel is going to look like in the next 4 or 5 years? But even domestically, just traveling around wherever it is that you live, but to some greener spots to look for nature, to engage with nature in whatever way that you want. More and more people are seeking that out. Um, and yeah, we don't really hear about it, but that's not to say that isn't occurring a lot.
yeah. I just think we need more industries that have got clout to become allies in this fight because forestry's got enormous clout, but it doesn't have the numbers of people involved, individuals involved, as tourism
Very
does.
true.
So,
Very true.
um,
Very true.
and
Tiny numbers in forest and diminishing.
and and although people go, well, does it really matter if we lose the swift parrot or the region honeyeater? Well,
Mm.
maybe on a global sense you could say, well, no, but it's going to bloody hurt if we lose the koala. And if we keep doing the things that mean we're going to lose the region honeyeater and the swift parrot, we're going to lose the koala, you know. Um, and people think we're being panic merchants, but the decline in the koala population has been staggering. And to think that Victoria is the stronghold, and I used to see koalas frequently when I was younger,
Mm.
but I haven't
Mm.
seen a koala in the wild for 20 years. I think the last time, it'd be 15 years. But they used to come to a house I lived at. Um, Regular visitors. The male doing his territorial calls and whatnot. But last time I was down there for a couple of weeks, I didn't see any evidence of them. Didn't see any crossing the roads at night, which is a lot of the
Mm.
sightings that we used to have with them.
Sure.
So, and that was in an area which is still listed as a stronghold. Um, who's going to? I mean, people are going to make the choices. Go to Africa, see elephants and antelopes, or go to Australia. Oh, they don't have koalas anymore. We won't go. We'll go to Africa. I think that's what people are going to do, and we're so dumb. We're so dumb. Anyway, there we go.
Ah,
My rant's over, David. Um, how how do you see the future of re-establishing, repairing? They're all loose terms. Tell me what terms we should be using when we're talking about taking an area that's been denuded and
mm.
and fixing it.
Sure. So this is something that people have been thinking about for a very long time. So broadly, the word is restoration. There's subcategories in that, but I think that's a word that most people can sort of grapple with and get behind. So fixing up a place that for
Yeah,
whatever series of reasons has lost a lot of the stuff that used to live there before it got buggered up. Um, and for a long time, there's this hypothesis that was formally named much later than it was actually adopted. It's called the Field of Dreams, the Field of Dreams hypothesis. So it was a crappy Kevin Costner movie about baseball and ghosts and stuff. But the one line that sort of lives on after that movie is,
build it
you know,
and they will come.
has gone, build it
Yeah,
and they will come, bingo. And so that's the implicit sort of axiom that drives a lot of tree planting, a lot of re-veg is put the trees back and wait, and just magically your Regent honeyeaters, your swift parrots, all those things that we worry about will magically find it, use it, and it'll be bush once again. And there's many problems to that approach. It does work for some things in some contexts. It doesn't work for a lot of other in a lot of other examples. And so Maggie and I wrote a paper about this, about wildlife restoration, about being much more active, about actively can you hear me?
I can now. I just got to
Internet.
I just got to say, Malcolm Turnbull, you are a legend, pal.
Big fan.
Oh, destroyed a nation building project. I mean, for listeners who aren't aware, David lives in regional New South Wales. You're on that side of the border, aren't you? So there we are.
Correct.
I live in the city. Once upon a time, we had a plan that we all would have been connected with fibre optical to our homes, and it would have been world leading. But of course, Conservative government decided that we needed to save a few dollars, and what they've given us is a steaming turd that can't be polished. So sorry about that, everyone. That imagery, but
Back to restoration. So a lot of restoration historically has been done in a fairly passive and very plant-oriented way. Either just remove the threatening processes if it was previously, a mine site, if it was previously, I don't know, some sort of toxic industrial area, just stop digging it up, stop putting nasty chemicals around. Often that's enough. In many aquatic areas, just remove the pollutants, just stop putting the pollutants in there, things will get better. But there's that many stresses happening to all of our the places where nature still hangs on. We want to try different ways of getting there quicker. Can we unstuff up places more rapidly? And are there ways to do that at scale? And that's where we're coming in with sound. We're saying, hey, by broadcasting soundscapes of how this place, this disturbed place, used to sound, or if we don't have that that historic information, just go down the road there to that good spot, and that's kind of best case scenario how we'd love this disturbed place to get to. Just record a week or so of that. Just play it straight. Play the raw soundscape, or maybe play favourites. Play a mixtape of the things that are most of interest, and then just wait. And many organisms use sound as cues to go, oh yes, go over there. You'll have plovers flying over at night. You'll hear them. They're looking for other plovers. They're looking for potential habitat to feed, to raise a family. It's basically co-opting those messaging channels. But then you might say, but wait a minute, Dave. Let's say the fire's gone through. Whole valley is denuded. There is no vegetation. And you're playing tapes. That's misleading advertising. You get bloody ACCC onto you calling in glossy blacks. There's no food for glossy blacks. How dare you? They're just passing through. They're in the neighbourhood. You haven't put them there. They're their own beasties doing their own things. If the resources aren't there, they won't linger.
Stop. That's right.
But here's the cool thing. They'll come by, have a bit of a sniff, have a bit of a crap, have a scratch, look around, go, no, there's no hollows, there's no she oak cones, I'm out of here. A revolution in human medicine is about our microbiome, about the organisms, the bacteria that's on us, that's in us, having a huge role in health, in how how we function. It's exactly the same in nature. And so a fire goes through an area, the bacteria, the fungi, that basically drive productivity in that system, that take organic matter and convert it into things that living things use. That's sterilized after a fire. That is gone. That's steam cleaned. By having a regular, steady stream of just random organisms coming back saying, oh yeah, looks all right. yeah, but it hasn't got what I need. I'm out of here. You're re-inoculating the environment with bacteria, with fungi, with protozoa, with algae, with seeds coming in on their feathers, their fur, their claws. That is a good thing. That is sort of fast tracking restoration from the ground up, rather than just from the top down of just thinking about the organisms that we see, the big things, the furry things.
And then if we think about those big organisms, and let's talk about the black cockatoos specifically,
Perfect.
they're long-lived birds, and they have memory. We know
Mm,
that. We don't know exactly how they work out where food sources are and when they're moving, but they uh, they will then know if they're familiar with what happens after a fire. I'm assuming that older cockatoos know that, oh, there's a fire through here, so in a couple of years there's going to be lots of she oaks here, or
indeed.
or or serrated banksias or whatever it is.
Sure.
So they know, all right, well, by the time Junior's a teenager, this will be a great spot. So we don't know how their mind maps work, but they have them because they know how to find new places. They do. So
And the idea that we're trotting out, as well as birds, frogs, all the rest of it, it's just as appropriate in underwater environments. So sound travels really well in water, freshwater, seawater. If you've got a massive coral bleaching event, um, there might be ways of encouraging things to come back using hydrophones, using underwater speakers as well. So don't just think terrestrial. This is in any system. This has merit.
very, very much so. Thanks for your comment, Chris. I appreciate that. I don't know if you saw that, Dave. He just followed up on my comment about the what you that which cannot be polished. I'll just pop that up again.
Ah, yes,
There we
excellent.
go.
Grogans.
There we go.
Plenty of those lately.
Yeah, exactly. And look, David, I'll just extend an invitation to the people who are watching that if you think there's a question that I haven't got around to asking, or you want to follow up with a comment or something, or tell us about something that's happening in your hood, just stick the comment in there and we'll address it. Unless it's one of those crazy Twitch people who say all kinds of random things, David. Um, so this approach, David, is it being used anywhere in Australia now?
No, it's not being
So,
used anywhere. So people have talked about doing this for restoration, but they're just focused on playthings and see if things come back. Uh, but that's at the species by species level. Nobody's tried this at the community scale. Um, and nobody's thought about this in terms of the bacteria, the fungi, the little things. So Liz and I were playing with these ideas, looking for potential grants, looking for potential systems to try this. And then look, it's a pretty broad idea. Let's just put it out there first, and then
yeah,
let's keep looking for partners. Let's keep looking for systems. So yes, it's a perspective piece at this stage. We don't have any current projects that are doing this on the ground, but this time next year, hopefully that will be the case.
and it seems to me that there's logical synergies between
Mm,
local government, Greening Australia, land care groups,
yes, agreed.
specific conservation groups like Friends of and whatnot,
Mm.
all to get together and work
And
on
one of the useful
projects.
things with sound as well, you can archive it. So a recording can be just pop there on the web. And so let's just say miscellaneous West Australian Mine Company.com.au dug a big hole, and then whatever they pulled out of that hole is no longer economical to pull out of that hole. They need
And
to
then
restore
uh,
that.
and then they went broke and didn't do the
What?
restoration and said,
So,
"You can do it, community." Where would that
okay,
happen? Where would that ever happen?
so let's go with they still remain viable because they dug
Okay.
another hole. Um, how, at what point do we, the community, the bearer, the holders of the Commonwealth that they have monetized, when do we say, yep, we're happy? You've done a good job. You've restored that to a level that we are happy with. Sound can be a really useful way of quantifying the entire community. The rustle of wind in the trees, the crunch of leaf litter underfoot, the way rain sounds when it comes down after a summer storm. That's all, there are acoustic indices that capture that amount of information about a system. You can record all of that before a single spade has been turned. You can bank all of that. And one of the terms of granting them the license to dig a big hole in the first place, you're going to get it back to this. And if you don't do that, you're not going to dig holes anymore. So there's ways of doing this in a way that the whole community, publicly, in a very transparent way, can be involved in that discussion.
Yeah. Now, you can see the comment there from Chris?
I can.
Here we go. Oh, this is even good. But maybe I think Chris is asking for an update on, is that A20 or A20? So
A20. That's the Acoustic Observatory.
There we are.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. So Chris is another member of the International Brotherhood of Watson. So we go way back. Thanks, Chris. Yes, A2O is going well, and really we're focusing on the back end of things. We're focusing on getting the data, on archiving the data, and on storing the data. There's many things we want to be able to do with it, and the point you've raised there is absolute top of the list. We need to train people to navigate large acoustic data sets, to do all sorts of visualization policies underpinning those visualizations, how we train those people, who those people are, how we share that information. I think that needs to be in an online setting and in a very much an open access way, so that it can all be seen and shared, effectively in real time. No massive nuggets of gold to share with you just yet, but it is a top priority for our group. More to say on that in a year or two.
Okay, so this is very much a long-term.
We want to do this forever, Grant. We want to do this forever. We've got those machines out there recording now. Those machines will fail. We'll replace them with newer tech that's cheaper and more accurate. We see this as a way of keeping tabs on the environment that is complementary to many other things that we do. But we are committed to this. We see this as a viable way of getting, essentially, once Australia invests in an internet, almost a live feed of how are things travelling in our systems. My dream for this is to have effectively a stock exchange, rather than watching a trace of some company that does who knows what, who knows where. You've got a live trace of, how are top-end birds dealing? Oh, have you read about the nectar shortages in the Roper River? Yeah, that's a problem. Should start seeing those blue-faced honeyeaters move into Darwin in the next 3 weeks. If you look, and that's all with sound. We can do that now. We just need to invest in a way to share and synthesize this torrent of data that we're currently collecting and mostly archiving. We're not doing a whole lot of on-the-fly analysis with it. We can do that. It's going to require tens of millions of dollars of investment to do that kind of thing.
So that was where I was going to go next. Now, we've got universities collaborating in this project, but then for it to become like reality, you need to have local government, state government, and mining bodies and whatnot involved too. So are the local government, how do I phrase this? Are there people in local government who are interested and
there are
think there's
many
a potential that, there needs to really be a position in local government that focuses on these kind of issues as much
There
as it
are.
needs a town planner.
So sure, and there are many councils have biodiversity types, have and often really talented, hardworking, diligent people doing their level best to hang on to all the good stuff in the area that they look after. Um, and sound, as much as habitat restoration, are elements of that. I think our focus with this project, at least initially, has been engaging with stakeholders who own and manage the places where we've put these machines. So we've dealt with private landholders, we've dealt with non-governmental organisations, and yeah, pastoralists. Plenty of agricultural groups are involved. That's where our focus has been. But yet, to scale this up, it needs investment. I mean, there's all sorts of things you can do on the cheap. But if we're serious about this, if we actually care about Australian nature, you're going to need to start to spend some proper money, not just little pissy, gold coins, actual money, proper money, and not through some pretend competitive grant system, because
No.
that's just a race to the bottom. That just
And that,
the people like me, we then spend half of our working life chasing money. Is that what you want me to do? Is that what you want me to do? Because that's what I'm
and
currently doing.
And that's exactly, Dave, why I get so frustrated and why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because you use the phrase there, if we really care. And that is the question that I always want to pose to anybody who is a decision maker and is who is allocating funds. But I also put it to anybody who tells me how much they love wildlife or they love animals. Fucking show me. Show me the money, right? Sorry
Indeed.
for the French, but it's so it I mean, I'm not even professionally involved in it, David. I can't imagine how frustrating it must be for you and for Chris and you know looking at bird life and whatnot as well. But because they have to tread lightly to to get the crumbs that they are given each funding cycle.
Many people walk that line, and yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky, and I think with climate, obviously, and human mediated climate change that absorbs pretty much all the oxygen in public debates about this stuff. That if you're trying to engage with a broader group of people, like what I call Kmart shoppers, everybody, about this kind of stuff, climate change is that big and that broad and that scary for even the most engaged people that there's very little left. There's very little left for them to talk about swift parrots. Or there's very little. It's not so much a compassion thing. It's just like they just don't have the reserves. And this is all of our. It affects everybody equally in terms of its direct impacts, but it plays a pretty heavy toll on environmental scientists. I mean, we live and breathe this, and so we're the walking wounded. We walk around daily, and there's always bad news.
Well, it's PTSD, isn't it? And some and and obviously not clinical PTSD. So hey, if you, I'll get some comments about that in down the track. But the point being that we're always doom scrolling in Twitter and whatnot, and I'm always asking for some good news stories, but there's just so few. There's just so few where you can actually say this has been a win. And I don't know, David. I'll just pop Chris's other comment up, and maybe did you see what I just put up before that Chris had asked David here?
I did, and there's a quick question, a quick answer to that. One of the main costs we've got for all of you for this acoustics stuff is just sending data around, because we send it around on SD cards. So 512 gig SD cards is the currency we use to move large files around. That and servers, like large air-conditioned warehouses full of machines, computers. That's where we're spending most of the money that we've squandered. We've squandered. That was a Freudian slip. Most of the money that we've managed to get together is on storage, is on data storage, and we're at capacity now. We know that many people are sitting on gold mines of additional acoustic data, both coming in now from sensors, but also sometimes historic stuff. And that is, we want to grandfather that in. We want to have one go-to, and it's a museum. The way of thinking about this is as a museum with a curator and a collections manager and an acquisitions policy, and a way of dealing with this sound as if it was a specimen with a tag tied to its leg. That's where we're going. Investment, whether Elon Musk, whoever, if there's, and there is money, there is significant philanthropic interest in the sort of tech environment space. This is doable. This is not pie in the sky stuff. This is all very doable.
Now let me put something controversial out there again, David and Chris. I'd be interested in your thoughts about this too, and anyone else watching. If you're one of these people that's frigging around with cryptocurrency, the computer power that is required to make your little bloody playthings and your NFTs is what's being denied to people like David to do real projects, saving real and this kind of rubbish. And these are the choices that we all have to make. Real estate in server farms and everything is really, really valuable. And at the moment, it's being used to mint bloody gorillas that Paris Hilton is promoting, and not being offered at discount rates to institutions that people like David and Chris are affiliated with, trying to actually do stuff that you can experience, real world stuff. So please, my plea is always think about the choices you make every day. And there we go. Sorry to be a Debbie Downer, but that's really one of the reasons why computing power is hard to get, is because it's minting bloody cryptocurrency. So there we go. Not that I'm against Elon Musk throwing billions of dollars your way at all, though, Dave. I would love to see it.
Good to know.
Chris, I'm assuming Chris is still watching. Are you working on anything in particular, Chris, at the moment that you would like to share with us? Because if you are, perhaps if you put your email address in the comments, I'll send you the link and you could jump in. And I'm sure Dave doesn't mind another Watson crashing his party if we've got something that we can
not at all
that we can share. I'm really interested, Dave, in how you would still see. There we go. Chris has got a. I'll pop that one up. There we are. Sometimes that's another problem, isn't it, David? In conservation generally, that if it's not open access, not everyone can benefit from the work that people are doing that might actually be significant and can contribute to the greater good.
Very true. If it's not open access, if it's in languages other than English, there's gold mines of information in PhD and honours theses just sitting on library shelves that doesn't see the light of day. There are many of the ways that we do science now is ridiculously inefficient.
I'm gonna get another hobby horse out here because we're particularly talking about re-establishing habitats. I get annoyed with the fact that we're still destroying habitat. Now that's a whole different issue, right? That's a whole different issue, and that we need to get on top of that. But I get frustrated with the institutions which are largely, almost totally publicly funded, um, being complicit in a lot of the problems and the problematic habits that we are getting into. For instance, no one from Melbourne Zoo will speak to me now. They're getting involved in captive breeding projects, but as probably the flagship conservation body in the city of Melbourne, they're not putting any pressure on anybody to stop habitat destruction. It will be hidden in stuff on their websites and whatnot. But why? I get really annoyed when I see people will be at the photo opportunities with the minister for releasing some region hunting.
Well, as Chris mentioned in his like, I'd love to tell you, but it's all under client privilege.
Yeah.
So many public institutions and the people who work at those institutions, at least one hand is tied behind their back. And so for Melbourne Zoo,
which is a big problem, though, isn't it? Because
it is. But Melbourne Zoo.
I just want to finish the point.
Go ahead.
Because I'm someone who cares deeply and will do things and will be involved and will put my time into doing stuff. If you've got the minister there and 3 television networks and the radio networks and the daily newspapers, why is the minister not put on the spot saying, "But aren't we cutting down all the trees still?" Just put them in an uncomfortable situation and get the question out there with the small chance that it will make the news. Not the fact that, isn't it great, we've bred 250 birds or we've 50 birds or 5 birds or however many, 2,000 birds, and they piss off into the ether and they got nowhere to go, right? To me, it just seems like it's ridiculous. It's good PR, right? It's good PR, and that's what annoys me.
Yeah, fair.
Oh, good. I thought I was just being grumpy old man.
No.
So how do we broach, or how do we overcome that? Not broach it. I broach it all the time. How do we get to this point where you're chasing grant money all the time just to keep being able to do work, even though you're employed at a university, right?
Correct.
Interested in your comments too, Chris, and anybody else who is on board. What's something that we can actually do to get past this situation that we've been repeating for 20 years, where and we're not winning. We're not winning.
Don't vote for Conservatives. Don't vote for Conservatives who see small government, which is code for giving an increasing chunk of taxpayers' money to their favoured, friends. Just don't do that. So many things become possible once you don't have a Conservative government. So that's one tangible thing that you can do very, very soon.
Yeah, and if you from overseas, we're in election season in Australia, so we're all kind of head up about it. It's our one chance in 3 years to maybe make a difference. Are there any examples where we're winning the battle? The PR seems to be that we might be winning the battle with the orange-bellied parrot, but have we got any other cases where we can say we're clearly winning? Are we winning with quolls? Are we winning with numbats? Are we winning with anything? Chris, I'd love your input here.
Yeah, all the examples you're raising, I've got red flags popping up going, yeah, that's bad. Well, no, none of those are good news stories. There are good news stories. I think one of the big ones is there's a growing understanding that farmers, the big bad farmer, is actually quietly doing some of the greatest stewardship and management for nature conservation across Australia. They're doing it for free. They often do it at personal cost, I should say, not for free. They don't
Well,
get anything
well,
out of it.
actually, let's just tease that out. They're not doing it for free because they have the use of the asset that is required for the wildlife to live. So they
Indeed,
have a beneficial involvement. They're not
indeed.
doing it for free, and I wish we would move away from that. I reckon if you have the exclusive right to occupy and use land, we then come back to that issue about you've got the right with the people, but do the animals have a right? Do all the local species also have a right to some kind of foothold on that land? And that's the thing we never really talk about as a community. We all want to save the animals, but
And certainly in my discussions with, so I live in a rural area, the Blue team are all mostly farmers. And when we talk about just random stuff, they care. They care deeply about the goanna that they
absolutely.
see in the back block, about those birds that only come through now and then. They want to know more about stuff. They genuinely care. So that care word that you're talking about, that I think your average rusted on lot more about nature conceptually and nature, like actually these critters in this part of the world, than than number one, than we give them credit for, and number two, than a lot of what you would deem to be progressive urban dwellers.
Hmm.
A
I,
lot more.
I'd like to see a system where we can ascribe a economic value
We've
to.
got that. It's paying for carbon. We've got that. If
But no, but apart from carbon, because that's in that equation. But I would like to be able to say to a farmer, a landowner. I don't want to say farmer because it
fine,
sometimes sounds pejorative,
fine.
but to any landowner in the, let's say, the box woodland habitat, because we've been
Hmm.
talking about, or the box woodland region, because we've been talking about regents and swifties using the same kind of habitat, and we say, okay, if you can verify a record, let's say 5 records, feeding records of more than 10 region honeys on your property over a 5-year period, you get a $50,000 bonus from the government.
Even
And
better.
then,
So, and
right?
I've written a
So,
book about this. Even better. Here, and oh, by the way, here's your 6 Coventry skinks, and
yep,
here's your,
yep,
you qualify for wildlife that we will actively put back on your place because you're clearly doing a good job.
yep. And what I would like to see, because we're living in a country where we've denuded so much of it to the point where even the traditional agricultural pursuits do not pay a living wage.
Indeed.
So you can still be a farmer, and dad's a farmer, but mum's the matron at the hospital. Whereas 40 years ago, mum didn't have to work; she was at
Mm.
home,
Hmm.
right? And we've got a whole lot of issues we need to tease out, and a lot of times these same people don't educate their own kids in the community. They send them to other communities to be educated, and a whole lot of issues about the mythology about local community and all that. I want to smash it all down, Dave. But I would like to have a situation, if we believe that the wildlife is important, that's the first decision we've all got to take, is that perhaps you could be paid enough to maintain the environment that you live in, to
So that's
not
what
have
happens.
to wreck it.
So that's what happens in most of Western Europe,
Hmm.
and that's called subsidies. That's the big bad European subsidies that undermine what.
Socialism,
That's
socialism.
that's a lot of
Yeah.
what that money actually goes to, is to look after some
And,
little butterfly.
and and Chris has hit the nail on the head here, because I've lived on farms and properties and whatnot. So if you've got, let's say, 1,000 hectares, you might only really be producing on 300 hectares.
Indeed.
That might be where the bulk of your income is produced year after year after year. So why can't we make some money out of the 700 hectares that is marginal at best and turn it into habitat?
And make it better.
It just seems like a no-brainer, and we just aren't. But
yes, that's because that those kinds of conversations very rapidly they get to the Indigenous perspective of land, where the land owns you, as opposed to the whitefella perspective, where we pretend that we own the land. And so once land ownership becomes a thing, then all of these other troubles stem from that. And so I think it's really comes down to a much deeper question about connection with country. And that gets back to recognition of our First Nations people, that Australia still seems to have some massive blockages about many people I talk to. I mean, completely completely cool with that. It's like, I can't believe we haven't done this yet. But as a nation, with an election, down the coming at us rapidly, we still don't recognise our First Nations people in the Constitution. The reconciliation debate. I can't believe it's still a debate.
Yeah, and look again. Let's throw this out even further. We still have to come up with the issue as a community about how we live as well. We're in the election cycle, and today interest rates might go up today, and everyone's talking about first homeowners, blockages to getting into the housing market, blah blah blah. But I'm not hearing anybody advancing the discussion about, hey, actually the way we carve up land and the way that we're building suburbs and everything is pretty fucking stupid, right? I mean, near me, there's a suburb called Melton and Melton South. Well, they built the houses, but they didn't bloody build anything else. So it's a hellhole, right? In terms of somewhere to live. Nobody aspires to live there because it's a new area, but it's an underprivileged area, and it's new. We repeat it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and we're not looking at medium density housing. So you build a new suburb and put 3 times as many people in there, but actually invest in infrastructure and make it a nice place to live, instead of carving off this tiny little corner of it, calling it a park, or having an offset, for want of another swear word. Use the F word, I'll use the O word as well. I mean, why aren't we learning, David? Why aren't we learning?
Yeah, well.
Oh, Chris, I'd be interested in your thoughts about offsets. I mean, when we talk about winning the battle, when we talk about winning the battle, David, are we?
Offsets
are they ever good?
No. Megan Evans, Martine Maron, there's some very clever Australian thinkers at the forefront of this internationally. And yeah, too long, didn't read. It's a con. It is a con.
Yeah, as Chris has just put up, scam, which is exactly. I think it's worse than that. I reckon it's theft.
Chapter and verse.
Yeah. Because people are still defending the system. Are they only people who have a professional benefit from being involved in it? Okay.
Either that, or they're pathologically naive.
Okay. Yeah, fair enough. I was hoping we'd be able to be lots more positive today, Dave, but because I always want to throw it out there. Where are we winning? Are we winning in engagement?
Where are we winning? Bloody hell! No, we're not winning in engagement. That's for sure. Okay.
Education, in terms of let's talk about awareness in schools. Are kids more aware? Like, I'm glad you're shaking your heads, because I reckon that my generation, and I'm assuming your generation. I don't think there's too many years between you and me. I reckon we had a really good exposure to natural sciences in primary school and early secondary school. I certainly, I certainly did. In terms of being aware of the problems, I did environmental science was offered to me in year 11. I
Great.
did marine studies in year 10. Um, uh, we went on excursions to places to hear birds and see birds, and
Yeah,
went
so
to Healesville Sanctuary. And
I've got three kids. Two are at uni, and one's in year 8 right now. And so Maggie and I pay pretty close attention to their curriculum and what they're learning. They're pretty switched on. They're getting a lot of good stuff at school. That's not representative of all Australians, obviously.
yeah, they've
But
also
I
got
think,
two parents who live and breathe it. So yeah,
yeah. So they're rusted on. It's tragic. Very true. Uh, yeah, it's. I think awareness is there. But I think talking with my students at university now, they feel a crashing despondency that the world that they are moving into is going backwards in every way for them personally, in terms of home ownership, you've mentioned, all that sort of stuff, job security, quality of life, but then in the broader context, in terms of a continent, the fabled continent of Africa, where the largest mammal is going to be the cow. That is foretold. That will happen probably in my lifetime.
it's horribly depressing, isn't it? All right,
But there's ways of dealing with this, and they're all very personal. I've written about this, that life will continue, even if humans did their darndest to try and extinguish life on the planet. It could not happen. Humanity is rapidly coming to the end of our tenure. The sooner the better for everything else.
right.
But life will continue. Life will continue, and multicellular life has a greater future than its entire prehistory. So it's all good in the big
And
scheme of things. It's
that's
all
right.
good.
That's right. And who would have thought that it would have been the best time ever to be a nihilist, right? Because the end is nigh.
Yeah,
So,
really. Look outside.
um, what uh, Chris has put another good point here that uh, we've never had the possibility ever in history to know more than we can now. You can
Indeed.
know more now if you want to know it. Access to good info has never been greater. That's worth celebrating. I agree, and that's one of the reasons I'm lucky. I can do this. 30 years ago, I never would have been able to give you a nudge, Dave, and say, hey, let's have a yak next week and see if we
Sure.
can talk to a few other people. We would have had to go through a tedious process of organising to meet somewhere, and you're up there and I'm over here, and maybe we would have got together at a conference in October,
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
uh,
Yes, there's the power of connecting has never been greater, and that's worldwide. You could be in Latvia right now, and we'd be having the same chat. So sure, that is huge. And I think now the need for integrators and synthesizers has never been greater. People who are across a large subsection of what can be known, what is known, and making links, and making predictions. That's we're reliant on them more and more.
do you want to read that one out, that Chris's comment? Bring in the fire.
There is simply no excuse for ignorance now. That's something we should use to hold leaders to account. Well, indeed.
Yeah, I agree. And I extend it. I think we need to hold our friends, our families, our acquaintances, our workmates, our employers, everybody needs to be put to the test. There was an interesting discussion yesterday between, I can't remember, it was EDO and another lawyer talking about lawyers' ethics and who should you work for? As a lawyer, thanks, Chris. As a lawyer, should you make decisions about who you work for, who you represent? And I've got pretty simple views. Is when you walk out the door to go to work in the morning, or not work if you're a pensioner or whatever. But you don't leave your 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 ethics on
Your
the hook
principles.
where
Yeah,
next to your spare keys, right?
sure.
So, but I think over time we've allowed that to happen. Oh well, I know my boss is a complete bastard and is destroying other people's lives, but what can I do? I want a 4 bedroom home and 2 cars. What could I do? You know, I'm sure that I mean it's a long line, but it's a direct same line between people
Sure.
supporting dodgy regimes. It's just a
Sure.
very very long line. Um, I want to pose a question to the two of you that because I'm calling you a participant, Chris, because you've been great with all the comments. This reanimation discussion that seems to be happening. Um, One, is it the biggest wank fest that's ever been had in the world, or is there is there some good that can come from people wasting their time thinking about bringing back the paradise parrot?
Okay.
Again, where will they bloody live? That's the
Okay.
other question.
So I've thought about this
Good.
a fair bit, as you might imagine. So I think it's a fool's errand. It's a pipe dream. So many things would have to work out just right for it to have an Ice Cube's chance in Hades to get off the ground. It would require very long-term investment, substantial investment, and some of that would be new money. Some of that would be money that is just dedicated to that. So I think the argument of, oh, what could you do with that money? That doesn't necessarily work for all of that money. So the counterfactual there is, yes, you could have saved habitat, but some of that money only appeared for the Hail Mary shot of getting a thylacine or a paradise
Well,
parrot back.
but
But I
but
think
but but can't you see the situation where we'll rename the thylacine the twigathine? Can't you see that being possible? That someone with an
it'll never happen.
ego and and
It'll never happen.
and a
So the amount of biology that involved to get one individual thylacine as a living, breathing organism, that is right at the limits of what we can do now. It would require a monumental effort, but to get an actual population of organisms, that's
yeah, it's lunacy,
that
isn't it?
that's like setting up a Martian colony. That would
Yeah,
require so much stuff. It is potentially possible, but really, and I guess the biggest thing for me is, as an ecologist, extinction is final. Um, Once something is extinct, it is extinct. And if you even pretend that there's the possibility that you can just use your magic eraser and take it from the extinct pile and then magic it back into the reanimated woolly mammoth paradise parrot, we've made it. It's all so you continue. You can continue to dig holes. You can continue to blitz what's left of grasslands around Melbourne because the golden sun moth just magic them back. They've done it with mammoths. So I think that is such a dangerous box to even acknowledge, let alone to open and peer inside.
but my fear is that it's the old squirrel tactic, that it's making us look somewhere else, and that um so
In, it's
and
a bit like talking about transgender issues in an election. It's like
yeah,
just keep them
yeah,
talking, get them distracted, and ruin a whole lot of worthy people's lives. We're just trash talking them in the public sphere again. It's like bloody hell, really?
and but there are enough people with enough money and big enough egos to think that they are doing good works, forgetting that
There's a lot of that.
yeah,
There is a lot of that, and I think there is a responsibility with personally as well as my colleagues to really engage with those sorts of people and those sorts of sums of money. There are really significant things that can be done with modest sums of money. Let's focus on that. Let's
yeah,
focus on that. And there's organisations doing that, NGOs doing just that right now. And so they to me, they show a path. And a lot of that is about protecting land, about putting covenants on it, looking after it, making it better.
I think Chris hit the nail on the head with that comment. Focus on what we still have. Forget the sciencey party tricks. I think that's spot on. I mean, the frustrating thing whenever they talk about this rubbish, and even I mean, I'm a supporter in general of captive breeding and everything we can possibly do, but if you don't do the genetic work to support captive breeding, I would say, why are we doing it? But the most important thing is if we're not planning reintroductions, or as Chris said, translocations, into really good habitat where they have a chance to exist into the future, not just for the photo op for the minister. It's just
yeah,
bullshit.
maybe, but then sure, but then I guess one of the counter arguments to that is, but what about let's say a schoolgirl now who's 6, and on the weekend coming up, she's going to go with her family to Melbourne Zoo, and she's going to see a tiger.
Yep.
At close range, she is going to see it yawn. And that is going to change her entire worldview when she becomes the CEO of a company that doesn't exist now. That impressionable moment on her 6-year-old self will drive her to make decisions and sculpt her values that will make sure that tigers never go extinct in the wild. That is possible. That is not a pipe dream.
No. But I think we're.
But that means that means your value system needs to be sufficiently flexible that you can allow that individual tiger to have a terrible existence.
Yep, but that individual tiger is a symbol for I don't know what are there 8 different kinds of tigers, I think.
Well,
but
yeah,
but the chance of when that 6-year-old is 30, the likelihood is that there'll only be 2, and that's because we're not doing anything now, and that.
Sure.
And that every time we eat something that we bought in a box at the supermarket, we've contributed to that because of the reliance on crap like palm oil.
And you could come back to me and say, but there's been 6-year-old girls seeing tigers in zoos for the last century.
For 150 years, yeah.
If they haven't fixed it now, are they ever going to? So we can go round and around.
Yeah, no, and that's really why I asked the question about, are we winning? Like, because we've got the awareness and we've got the most access to knowledge, and we all know about Extinction Rebellion and the crisis and biodiversity. But here we are, 2022, we're in a national election, and I'm not hearing anyone talking about biodiversity loss.
No. It wasn't the last election. It was an election before that. A colleague at work, we were commiserating because the bad guys won. And he reflected over his cup of tea and said, I don't think anybody I've voted for in my entire life has ever won. And I had to agree. That's who we are. That's who we are.
Well, I was on the Rudd train. I didn't vote in the Hawke election. I think I put this out there on Twitter the other day. And actually, I'll just interrupt that thought. More tigers in captivity just in Texas than there are left in the rest of the world. And look, if we talk about birds, there's the example in Germany. A lot of the genetic pool for a lot of the threatened parrots in the world are held in one private collection in Germany. Which is nutso. We shouldn't. But I was at school when John Cain won in Victoria, when Bob Hawke won nationally. I voted for Gillard and Rudd. But we, apart from some of the stuff Hawke and Keating did, nothing's been transformational. And certainly in conservation, even with Garrett as Environment Minister. You know, a louder voice there has never been for conservation, but you still got to beat the vested interests, and that means the whole community have to be on board. And you know, maybe we're winning with the orange-bellied parrot, but if we win with that, it's only because nobody wants to build much more on where they are living. But you know, if they were a woodland species, they'd
it's
be
a longer story. The orange-bellied parrot.
Yeah,
the decline was happening even before white people got here.
Yeah. So they might just be doomed anyway. Gee, I reckon we've. What do we need to round off with about Soundscapes, Dave? What can people do?
Well, okay. So to round it off, let's bring it back home. And it's one of the points you make in the paper. So read the paper. It's a short paper. It's you'll read it in like 40 minutes.
Yeah, and there'll be a link on the site.
Sounds
are
there, engaging. So when you start talking to people of any age about nature, there'll be a link to sound. There'll be a link to the sound of magpies in the morning. When I wasn't living in Australia, I really missed not hearing the currawongs coming in the evening. Sounds are evocative. They're close to our heart. And so by using sound in this way, not only are there some genuine things we can do, some improvements to make in terms of restoration, I think it is a real way of connecting people with country and what country sounds like in a way at scale that I find really exciting, and is going to give people who live outside of places they care about, as well as people who live within places they care about, but are, for whatever reason, less able to engage with it directly. I think that is going to be an untapped gold mine of enthusiastic individuals. That helps me get up in the morning.
Great. Can people contribute recordings?
Down the road, yes, but we need money to keep the lights on in those server factories. So we're not able to take recordings freely yet, because we can't store them, archive them, back them up, share them. That is not cost neutral for us, but it is a priority for us. We want to be able to be in that position.
Is there a facility for people to support financially the project as a whole?
The Acoustic Observatory. So there is for the wetlands acoustic work. There's most definitely we've attracted philanthropic support for that. That's all based on philanthropic support. So there are ways to support that directly. The bigger, broader push for acoustics, no, that's something that's on us. We need to chase those resources down ourselves. I'm happy to do that. But we're not very good at asking for money from citizens, and I don't think that's money. I want. That's yeah.
No, it's a double-edged sword, the way I see it, because it's the responsibility of governments to do this, right? It's not the responsibility of the Tran family next door to me to be giving $30 to Dr. Dave,
exactly,
and
no.
$40 to the
exactly.
Royal Children's Hospital, and again, but we're being habituated into this bullshit. Again, the way I think is that we're being habituated into, isn't it great? Dave's got $20,000 to support another PhD student to do something that the conservation department isn't doing because it's too busy worrying about planning issues, right? I mean, for crying out loud, why have we got conservation or environment departments in the same department as a planning department? Fuck. How stupid are we? What's Chris? Here's another comment from Chris. People love learning more about bioacoustics. It's a great way of expanding our appreciation of nature to an underappreciated sense. I agree. Zeno Cantor, better resource if you're a bird nerd.
Isn't it great?
Actually, it's the second best resource on the internet for bird nerds. Thebirdemergency.com is the number one
There
resource.
it, there it is.
Yeah, but the Xenocanter is great. Do you use some of those sort of archives that are out there, Creative Commons, to inform the identification of calls and whatnot?
Oh
Or
yes,
are
big
all
time.
of you
And
smart
Xenocanto,
enough? Yeah,
no, Xenocanto in particular. But the tricky thing is that they're often not the kinds of recordings you need to use for a
yeah,
computer because
yeah,
they're lovely, they're clean, they're just that little chipper, chipper, chipper,
yeah,
and there it is. We want
yeah.
a computer to be able to deal with crappy noise, currawong in the foreground, traffic, a cow, because that's the recordings we get. So we need to train computers to do those filters that you and I do without even thinking about it.
Fascinating, fascinating subject. I'm sorry everybody for waffling on so much, but it's just a concept that we need to continue to focus on. Um, Dave, if you were to tell someone the most positive thing they could do for the environment in the next month, what would you tell them to do?
Vote for an individual who has demonstrated that they champion evidence-based policy and they care about the Australian environment. That's the one thing you can do.
Thank you so much for taking that hook so readily, Dave. Yeah, and look, not only if you're in Australia, um, that's common for everywhere where you live. Um, you need to take some personal responsibility for all the choices that you make. Um, and if you're like me and you care about birds and you care about plants and you care about animals, um, you need to exercise all of the influence that you possibly can on your friends, your neighbours, your family, your everybody, because we only get one dip at it, and if we don't win this time, who knows what will be left to save in the next election cycle. Thanks, Chris, for your kind words. It's been a great pleasure for me to meet Dave. I've been following his exploits with his aquarium. If you haven't checked out Dave's uh, ongoing project with the biggest private aquarium in New South Wales, I would reckon.
Oh,
Uh,
I doubt.
and the woodworking projects, and of course, Dave's also been popping out the I'll call it the "What Bird Is That" series. I love that you
Oh.
can just be walking around your property, Dave, and oh look, there we go,
That's it. That's how it's done. That's the
yeah,
magic.
trooper. Thanks for your input, Chris, and for everyone else that's been watching. I hope you've got some value out of it. Sorry for the rants again, everyone, but hey, let's get out there and just save birds would be my
Amen.
plea. Look forward to catching up with you at some other time, Dave. I'm sure we can find
Excellent.
actually, what before we do jump off, what other projects have you been working on recently? What?
Oh, fair few. Sandalwood has been occupying my mind a fair bit in WA.
Yeah, that's one I do want to talk to you on a separate.
Yeah,
Uh,
and also
because there's a lot
various
to talk about.
mistletoe-related projects. So lots of mistletoe things on the go. Some cool papers coming out there. Yeah, and a lot in the acoustic space of using sound in all sorts of ways, and then verifying that what you hear is actually a good representation of what's actually there, because that's not always the case.
And I'm really mindful of how much time I've taken, Dave. So I want to run through the bird emergency questions with you at some stage to get your take on those. But you can have a bit of time to do the homework with that, and we'll organise another session to talk maybe a bit more about a particular bird project. So let's
Perfect.
put our thinking hats on for that. Yeah, thanks, Chris. It's been good to have your input. These sessions are always more fun when the peanut gallery is doing more than throwing peanuts. So that's great. Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone. I'm Grant Williams. This has been the Bird Emergency. That's Professor Dave Watson. I can give you the big P, can't I? Charles Sturt University, and a champion for the birds. See you later, everyone. Bye.